Hello everyone. Hi guys. How are you guys doing? It's Monday. I'm doing very well. And I wanted to come to you to talk about a topic that we started discussing last week. And today I would like to give you a little bit more information on it. And the topic is our associations with food. And if you are someone that has been addressing this problem before, if you are serious about really healing your relationship with food, you probably started examining your first associations with food and what food meant for you and how you were fed at your childhood home. These are very good starting points to start discussing this, the first formation of associations with food. And I would love for you to have an intention of being a little more open-minded to what is it that I'm about to say. And if this is something that really challenges your worldview and beliefs, maybe treat it a little bit more like a story and see if by doing so you are a little bit more open to these ideas and at least to exploration of them. Okay? So I am sure that you probably have been examining the first times when you were fed and how food and the food culture at your home, your first experiences with it. Maybe at your home there has been a set time for meals. Maybe at your home there was only one person cooking or preparing meals for you. Maybe at your home food was not always available. Maybe you are coming from a household that because of certain socio-economic circumstances, the food safety was a little challenge. So wherever you're coming from, you're going to have a different association with food, what food means, and how it was actually served and given to you. But I would love to take you a little bit further back than those first meals with family, or maybe even being fed by your mom with the first finger foods or solid foods. So we as humans, as developing humans, as human beings, as a member of the animal kingdom, we are coming from an egg and a sperm. And that little egg where you're coming from has been developing in your mother when your mother was still in your grandmother's womb. So the information encoded in the egg that you're coming from is also partially coming from the stress and the circumstances, situations that your grandmother felt and experienced during her time of pregnancy with your mother. Well, from that little egg that you're coming from, there's something called the yolk sac. Just like any egg, any chicken egg, there is a yolk inside the egg that is feeding you, your developing fetus, when you are traveling down to the uterus and the placenta is being formed, just like any other egg out there, any other animal coming from an egg, right? So when that yolk sac is feeding you, imagine just any other egg out there, the yolk, the yellow part of the egg feeding you. This is actually where your first associations with nutrition coming in are being formed. And the information about that yolk sac and how much nutrients, how much nutrients there are in that yolk, what is in it, because we women are born with all of the eggs already in us. They are not developing when we are growing up. They are developing when we are in our mother's womb. So the stress of your grandmother is encoded in that egg as well. Let's just imagine that is possible. If this is challenging your belief system, let's just imagine that it is possible. So I'm going to give you my example. My grandmother was born around the time of World War II starting. So when she was still in my grandmother's womb, there was a time of uncertainty. There was a time of fear. There was a time of great anxiety. There was a time of not having enough nutrition. And the nutrition actually was not the priority. Being safe and that uncertainty was the priority. So imagine the emotions of I need to be safe, I don't know what's going on, the government that was supposed to protect me failed to protect me. We are at the verge of this huge conflict. Just imagine that happening around you. Do you feel the emotions raising up in you? And now imagine that that information is also encoded in the egg that my mother is going to come from. Now let's imagine that my mother grows up. She grows up in the, I'm originally from Europe, from Poland. As you can see, even I'm wearing a little bit of clothing that maybe shows you that. So my mother, when she was growing up, when she was a teenager, when she was growing up in the post-communistic Poland. So the food for her was also challenged. Maybe you heard stories about people being handed food stamps, and there was a certain allocation of food you as a family are supposed to get from the government. I remember stories being told at my home about food not being available. There was just nothing you could have gotten, and you had to really work your way around the current political situation to get food. So my mother's associations with food probably were, it's difficult to get. Once you have it, oh, cherish that. Food can always disappear. Your safety and your access to food is not secured. And she also has that information, that unconscious, that first flavor, the first wave of emotions associated with nourishment from my grandmother. Let's imagine that my mother gets with my father and I am being conceived. In those times, back in 1986, again, food was difficult to get, okay? So my mother and my father had a little bit different priorities than what we might have in our society here today, right? Every generation is different. And I was also conceived in 1986, and that was the year when the great Chernobyl disaster happened in Ukraine. That was the time when the nuclear plant blew up and spread the toxic nuclear waste all around Central and Eastern Europe. And when I, as a fetus, was developing in my mom's womb, she was not only exposed to that toxic radiation, she was also given radioactive iodine, huge amounts of iodine that were supposed to help with the radiation, but they didn't. They actually, the toxicity of that moment, my mom taking that medicine, is encoded in me. And hello, today I have problems with my thyroid because of that event. But moving forward to explain how your first associations were formed with food. Now, in my story, my mother was on a bed rest for a very long time, close to 5 months of her pregnancy. So she was not only in the hospital, eating the hospital food, not being able to access her own food and even get the foods that she wanted. She was at mercy of somebody else. Also remember, this is a post-communistic country. We're still not free, totally free from the influence from the East. So the food that you're getting is what you get is what you get. That's what's available, and you better be happy with that. So imagine the fear of my mother, the uncertainty, how alone she was being in a hospital, hospitalized for that. And all of that information is coming to me through her placenta, through the umbilical cord that is between my mother and her. And we now know from science, it has been confirmed, the placenta is not a barrier between the mother and a child. Those little proteins around the perimeter of the placenta, they are letting information through. The biochemical information and also the electric impulses, the energy information. And as we know, emotions are energy and motion. So what my mother felt first, and I discovered that when I had my own womb healing done with another facilitator. I am doing a metaphysical anatomy healing sessions with my clients, and I also had that session done on me, specifically on the topic of the first contact with my mother, especially how I was nourished by her through the umbilical cord. And I could clearly feel the toxicity of that iodine. I could feel it all around my body. And I could feel during the session my mother's isolation and the fear for the security, not only mine, but also hers. Food was not available to her readily. She did not have a choice. She was again at mercy of someone else. So I already have predispositions from my mother, from my grandmother, to feel like that when I am being fed, when I have nutrition coming in. The emotions that I felt when nutrition from my mom was coming to me, and what she felt was encoded in that food coming from her, I unconsciously, through my body, through those memories from the cells, through the memories that were given to me from my mother, they were being woken up in my body. And I had the similar associations around food. Of course, you do not have direct access to that information unless you're looking for it. But your body knows, your body always listens, and there is information in the DNA, in the cellular memory, encoded and being woken up with the same, not only biochemical environment, but also emotional landscape of the moment. So my first associations with food were of insecurity, of fear, of having to fight for it, and of having to use it up, because you don't know when the next meal is going to come from, or from whom. People living in poverty, growing up in poverty, in countries or geographical areas with famine are probably feeling the same. And also, if you are a child of a mother that had a negative self-body image during pregnancy, and she was in some way, shape, or form moderating her food intake, what she was eating with anxiety and fear of gaining weight. In the body, it also feels that the security of the food is not there, and then that not enough food is coming in. The food supply is not being secured because for some reason it's being blocked. Now, let's say by the mother that was anxious about gaining weight, or maybe she was shamed in the doctor's office. Hey, you're gaining too much. My notes are telling me that you're not in the percentile I want you to be in. You need to moderate your food intake. That shaming off, that judgment from the doctor, and that mother not feeling secure and confident about her own ability to feed herself also challenges the food supply coming in. So we already, everybody out there, depending on whether or not you know your birth mother, maybe you don't, maybe you do not know even her history of her health during pregnancy, maybe you never even met your grandmother to examine what kind of stress she was in when she was pregnant with your mom, when she was developing. You do not have to know that. If you're working with me, and when we have a trauma release session together, your body lets us know how she felt. That information just comes through once we're being playful. And we are also exploring and asking very curious questions. So if you have questions about that, comment down below, send me a message. Moving forward, so you are growing up in your mother's womb, and you have that information coming through the umbilical cord. Let's imagine everything is okay, everything is all right. You're growing up in a loving home. Your mother is choosing the foods that really resonate with her in the amounts that she feels safe with. You're born, you had an amazing birth. Mother had an amazing birth experience. Nothing was going wrong. She had loving people around her. She felt safe giving birth. You're then the first time you're being close to your mother, to her chest, to her breast, and when, let's say, your mother does have milk supply and she can feed you, how she feels feeding you and giving you the food when the food is coming from her to you is also very important. As we know, the milk that we are drinking from our mothers, or maybe it was a bottle, I'm going to talk about it in a moment, anyways, is water. Water is a beautiful conductor of energy. Emotions are energy and motion. So they are being conducted from your mother through the milk to you, and you are eating, metaphorically speaking, what she's feeling. And it's a beautiful thing when a mother has love for you and she's certain about her being a mother, and she's supported by family members and your biological father. And let's say she is in an environment, in a hospital, around people who really support her as a mother. I work with enough people to know that this is not the case. A lot of moms feel very uncertain. They're unable to feed the baby. The baby cannot latch onto the mother's breast. There's a lot of pressure put on the mother because you're supposed to have it figured out. Come on, you're a mom right now. Maybe they don't hear it from people, but they certainly can feel it, especially if you have someone very judgmental in a family. Maybe your mother was not ready to have a child, financially ready, emotionally ready. Maybe there is a lot of uncertainty, and now mom feels very unsure. Maybe some of you are coming from families where those first moments were challenged in a very, very traumatic way. Maybe you were born via cesarean and you were then put in a little, those plastic boxes, they look like isolation cages. And you were fed via tube from nurses they were coming and going. You did not have that certainty, that heartbeat that you were so used to for so many months next to you. Maybe your first associations with being fed is isolation, rejection, abandonment. If you are a baby that was separated from the mother right after birth, where you fed food that was made in a factory by machines, formula, or was it food coming from your mother? Was it her milk? Was she able to actually have the milk supply for whatever reason it is? This is not to bash on mothers. Every single mother does the best she at the moment knows how to do for her child. So those associations first, they already are setting a stage for your relationship with food. And I have some notes here because I don't want to forget. This is very important. We talked about the yolk sac, the first nutrition you're getting as a developing fetus before the umbilical cord is formed. And in that yolk sac, you're going to find some of your grandmother's stress. So imagine you knew what your grandmother could have felt when she was pregnant with your mother. Was there famine, unsafety, some kind of rejection? Was she alone? Grandmother, a single mother? Is there maybe a little bit of resentment? Could it be possible that the relationship between your grandmother and grandfather was challenged? Let's imagine that we know. Let's imagine that that was the first piece of information you have to form your own associations with food. Then the placenta and the umbilical cord are being formed when you are developing as a fetus. So your mother's stress, what she's eating, and if she has a steady supply of food, is also being given to you via the umbilical cord. Her beliefs, especially about herself and how she views herself. Her associations with being pregnant. Or maybe now she's challenged by her own mother. Is it possible that your mother, it was a teenage pregnancy, an oops baby? How did your mother feel when she was pregnant? And do you see a correlation between that possibility? Maybe you don't know that. Maybe you're just imagining right now how she could have felt and how you feel about being fed. How do you feel about getting food and eating? Is there a correlation between the emotional stages of your mom and the food? In the womb, also something called the identity overlap happens when you take on your mother's emotions as your own, where you don't really feel the separation between you and your mother. Of course, your limbic system is still developing, so you don't have a logical and conscious access to these emotions, but your body, your developing body and your cells register that dynamic. Are you playing out in your life what your mother was playing out in her life when she was pregnant with you? And this is exactly why we address womb trauma during the program that I am inviting you to join, Ditching Diets program, where we heal during the healing of the womb, your first associations with nourishment, also with boundaries, the placenta, and also how you receive, especially from the life force, the umbilical cord. So when you are then born, then there's a stage of breastfeeding, or maybe you were fed by a bottle for whatever reason. And how did the person feeding you feel about feeding you? Was there a little bit of impatience? Was your mother really, really tired? Did she feel safe? Did she have enough support? A lot of mothers are very, very tired. They are also a little bit frustrated about the breastfeeding process. It hurts. How did your mother feel? How could she feel when she was feeding you, when you were receiving food? When we are being fed via bowel or breastfeeding, we are still at this stage in our development when we are asking for food as babies according to our hunger cues. We're hungry, we cry for food. We are not hungry anymore, we turn our face away, we don't want to suck anymore, right? So this is where our boundaries with hunger are still respected. But then we are entering a stage when we have our first experiences with finger food and solids. And in the beginning, maybe it happens through play, but I am sure every mother at some point really felt frustrated feeding a child. It's messy, and the child is the king. The child wants to eat, it will eat. The child doesn't want to eat, it won't eat. So this is where a little bit of a power play starts to happening. Your mother, because of her schedule, because she has so many things on her mind, she has to do so many different, and maybe she works also. You are being given a feeding schedule. So your hunger is slowly being disregarded. You are being fed when you do not want to eat. You don't feel hunger because it's time for eating. And you're also being told, wait a little bit. I need to get home. I don't have food ready available right now. However you were being brought up at home, right? So imagine you as a baby are hungry right now, but you have to wait. The uncertainty again comes up. Where's my food? And why am I being fed right now? Why are you pushing this little spoon into my mouth when I'm not hungry? You're fighting with me. There's a power play. But you, mother, are my God right now. Everything comes from you. You are the only person I really, really know, metaphorically speaking. So I am going to bow down to your needs and how you feed me, because you are my source of safety, of love, of inclusion, of positivity. Safety comes from you. And to get that safety, I am going to do anything. So you love me, don't turn away from me. And this is the first stage where we start to eat according to schedules, not according to our hunger fluctuations. And maybe you're coming from a home where food was just always available. It was not a big deal. It was not hidden from you. But also maybe you're coming from a home when you were given food as a reward for behaving well, or maybe a distraction where you were acting up or actually not knowing how to deal with your emotions. To pacify you, to distract you, you were given food. So imagine, I am in the distress, food is given to me, I'm okay. Those associations are also with you as you grow up, as you start forming your own, and later on making your own decisions around food. So did you feel rushed when you were first fed solid foods from your mother? Was there a feeling of frustration and anger maybe? Is it possible that your natural internal schedule of eating, the hunger fluctuations, were totally disregarded and you were fed according to a schedule in some way, shape, or form? And did you eat things that you actually like, or were you forced to eat vegetables that you don't like? There's a difference between trying different ways to see if the baby likes, let's say, broccoli, and actually forcing the baby to eat the broccoli because you're not eating that, then you're not eating anything at all. Again, I understand that every mother does the best she knows how to do to raise the child. But how the child perceives that experiment, that experience, is what is true for the child. Emotions, associations, this is all very subjective. Emotion-based logic is left outside the door because there is no logic in the body. You either feel safe or unsafe. So is it possible that the majority of your associations with being fed actually felt unsafe to you? And now it is being reflected in your adult relationship with food. What do you feel? What images come to your mind when we are talking about this? What associations do you have with being nourished? And this is where I invite you to just pull a piece of paper and pen and write down on the top of the page, nourishment, being nourished, and receiving. Those 3 words. Take a deep breath to reset the frontal cortex. Be playful. If I knew what my subconscious or even unconscious associations with nourishment are, what would they be? Start writing them down. Receiving nourishment means being seen. Receiving nourishment means pressure of time. Receiving nourishment means maybe you feel a certain physical sensation in your mouth. When I just did that and asked the question, what I felt was a spoon being forced into my mouth. Maybe there's a color or a smell. Maybe the food was usually colder or more cooler than what you would like it to be. Is there a temperature associated with it? Receiving nourishment means I see a white color, for example. Oh, okay, let's imagine that I know what that white means. It means being by the window. Okay, so how does that reflect what is going on in my life right now and with eating? Or I actually, when I eat, I don't like to eat with low light. I like to see what's on my plate. So going out to restaurants when there's very low light or candles, the experience is a little different than eating it during the day, let's say outside, having a picnic. I would prefer to have a picnic instead of a romantic candlelit dinner. And I remember being fed by the big, huge kitchen window. Okay. Write it as many times as you want. Just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, and see if the list that you receive now, through that stream of just writing it down, being playful, whatever comes through, write it down without judgment. Let's just write these words down. Is there a correlation between what you see here and what is going on in your life right now? How does that make you feel? And is it possible that your relationship with food, especially when it's challenged, did not start with you? That there is an overlap of identities and beliefs between your mother and you, and also your grandmother's emotional trauma, maybe trauma associated with famine, with poverty, also encoded with your relationship with food. Do you feel unsafe not having food? Do you feel a pressure that you have to clean up your plate? There's a little bit of fear. Where could the next meal be coming from? If there was an emotion in the food, in your favorite foods that you're eating and craving all the time, what could it be? What is the emotional flavor of your relationship with food? I am very interested. What is it that you guys come up with? What information comes through? I would love to see your notes. I would love to hear from you. You do not have to comment openly here. You can send me a private message. We can chat about that. Thank you again so much for paying attention. And if something comes up that you would like to explore a little more, or maybe you did have a challenged relationship with your mother and you already know that there is something that needs attention in healing, I invite you to let me know, because I do have a fantastic trauma release modality that I work with that can really beautifully help you without the need to relive that trauma, to really notice a difference between the food, emotions, your mother, and your identity. There is a beautiful way to heal your relationship with food. And I include that in each and every program that you're coming in and signing up for when you are ditching diets with me. So I invite you to let me know how you feel about this video, what comes through, and hopefully I will hear back from you very, very soon. Until then, have a very awesome Monday. Bye-bye.